Thank you, Steve. I was asked to discuss perennials for spring bloom, and that's what I'll do. So if we could go to the next slide. Actually, if we could back up one more, I'm sorry. Can we back up to the prior slide? Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I'll be discussing these. This picture is of Virginia Bluebells at their peak, which is early spring. And as you can see, they spread widely and profusely. So usually in wetter areas, bottomlands. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I just wanted to clarify what a perennial is for anyone listening who did not know. It's an herbaceous flowering plant. Herbaceous meaning it has soft tissue rather than a woody tissue like a shrub or a tree. And the roots of this plant survive through the winter by virtue of the fact that the soil stays warmer than the atmosphere. They die back in the fall, many times just to a bunch of leaves near the ground, basal leaves they're called. And they can, because of this, they can be last quite a long time for a plant, 15 years and up. So my inspiration for gardening and in general is the native flora of the eastern US. I've lived on the East Coast. I'm originally from New Jersey. And nature in general. I find it's just mind-blowing what goes on there. I'm actually studying a lot of nature down here at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, which is where I'm at right now. Anyway, I am interested in the local flora, and my feeling is that it has priority in my garden for various reasons that I'll mention. On the other hand, I do like plants from other continents, which many of those are sold in big box stores and nurseries. But I mainly like the stuff that grows nearby, or at least North American. My approach has assigns less value to traditional garden design. Is it pretty? Are the colors blending correctly? And I put more emphasis on the support of nature, such as this spice bush swallowtail on the left. And you'll see that coming up. Some of the plants I've picked are not beautiful in our standard way of thinking about plants. So why do the native plant movement has been around for decades now. And the question is always asked, why do people plant natives? And for me, the key issue to me is that the birds, wildlife have co-evolved with these plants and depend on them to a great extent. So when we come into our development and destroy all of the native plants and put in exotic plants, we're, in many cases, condemning those native butterflies, birds, animals to death. They can't survive without them. Butterflies are, the caterpillar stage of butterflies is very dependent on some of them on particular plants, such as the spice bush swallowtail. Spice bush is a understory shrub, obviously native, and the caterpillar lays its eggs on that, and those eggs have to eat spice bush to live. There are generalist butterflies, caterpillars, but some of them are very particular about what they eat. So well, other parts of why natives are good includes ecosystem support. As I mentioned, these birds, bees, frogs, toads, fungi, and also that includes water quality and air quality. And in particular for this talk, I'm mentioning that the early spring flowers support pollinators who in February, March, there aren't many flowers out then. And so if we can plant early spring flowers, we can support those pollinators. I just read an article on the American bumblebee. Some states it's completely disappeared. Others, 90% down. So pollinators need all the help they can get. Okay, next slide, please. There we go. All right. Since they are long-lived, you want to make sure that the soil you're going to be planting them in has been prepared for a long-term life of the plant. Master gardeners always recommend that you have a soil test, which they have. I think you can ask any master gardener. They'll give you a little package with a box that you can take soil samples in and mail it down here to Blacksburg, and for a modest fee, and they will tell you all the essential details about your soil, the pH level, the nutrients, what's there, what's missing. I think the form that you fill out also asks you to specify what you're going to be growing in that, because some plants like a higher pH, a more alkaline soil, and others like more acidic. We always recommend amending soil with organic matter and or composted manure. The reason for that is that it improves the texture of the soil, and it also, organic matter that's been broken down holds nutrients better than any other part of the soil, including the mineral part. The only other part of the soil that holds more or a similar amount of nutrients is the clay particles. So one thing to keep in mind with soil is that there's an entire ecosystem from micro, tiny, invisible to the naked eye organisms up to the big ones that you can see, like earthworms. Ideally, soil should be 50% air and water, and you want to avoid compaction. I have a neighbor of mine in Fairfax, and he runs his pickup over his yard, and I'm like cringing, thinking about how much compaction that is going, is resulting. Air, again, you lose that air and water in it. It's difficult for the roots to penetrate compacted soil, so you want loose, well-structured soil. And the nutrients that they recommend should be added to the top 6 inches of the soil once you've added the organic amendments. Next slide, please. Okay, so on to some of my favorite ones. There's hundreds of them, but I just wanted to pick out a few for the springtime that are really beautiful, and also that I have experience with. So one of them is the Virginia Bluebells. The genus for that is Mertensia. And these are another really fascinating part of nature. They exploit the light niche that occurs in spring between the time when the daylight increases and the time when the tree canopy has completely leafed out. So, and bluebells are not the only plant that does this, but they have evolved to take advantage of that, I would say approximately about a month period. And again, we saw that first picture, the first slide had them covering a huge area. One thing to keep in mind is that these ephemerals, they completely wither and die. So they will disappear after they've done their thing and the tree canopy is fully developed. So whenever I've had maintenance people in my yard, like, don't step over there. And they're like, what's the problem? And well, guess what? There's plants growing there and I don't want to step on them. They do spread fairly easily. So you can buy one plant and they'll move around. Like all plants, they, that can move easily. And these are one of them. They will move to an area where they like, probably in my case, they move to an area where there's a little bit more light. So next slide, please. Another favorite of mine is called spiderwort, Tradescantia, and it is a prairie plant. And I've for the first year, I think this is the first year that I've noticed it. Maybe it was last year also, but down here in Blacksburg, I planted some in full sun, and it just blooms and blooms and blooms all season long. It's not just the springtime. It's actually even blooming out there now. So these are wonderful plants. They just keep blooming. Again, I put these in full sun, and that seemed to be the key to the prolific and long-lasting bloom. And like all prairie plants, they have deep roots because the soil out there on the prairie didn't have a lot of trees in it due to the lack of moisture. And that was the other reason that the prairie plants send down very deep roots. So that's a favorite, Tradescantia, also known as spiderwort. Next slide. Wild blue indigo, blue wild indigo, is another favorite perennial, blooms in the springtime. I'm actually starting some right here in Blacksburg now, and I've seen them get quite large. They put on a beautiful display in the springtime. Unfortunately, they do produce these black seed pods after blooming, which don't look so great. But again, my philosophy is if it's helping nature, I'll deal with a little less of the traditional beautiful garden look. But they also like, I would say, full sun on the wild blue indigo. So another beauty that you can put in and have springtime bloom. Next one. I started this relatively recently. Bignonia is the genus, crossvine. It's a very early bloomer. So again, birds like hummingbirds or insects need that stuff, those flowers, because they're quite, there's less of them very early in the season. So you do need some kind of a support. In my case, I have a fence around part of my yard to keep the deer out. And my bignonia crossvine is just growing on that and making it look a lot better than it otherwise would. They do have a nice fragrance also. So that's a favorite. Again, native. All the ones I'm talking about tonight are natives. Next slide. Yes, I believe it is. Somebody asked if wild blue indigo is Baptisia. Mayapple is another one that will spread. It does occupy the ephemeral, space, although these seem to last longer into the season, the umbrella type leaves. You want to watch out. They are supposedly poisonous, the leaf and flower and stem. So you want to be aware of that if there's children around. And they do spread by underground rhizomes. I've never actually seen, I guess I have seen the apple itself. But they also, full disclosure here, they can look a little ratty after they've been up for a couple of months. But it's wonderful to watch them. The umbrella comes up and it's folded up, and then that roundish leaf on the top opens up. It's really beautiful.
Patrick?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
My husband grew up in Pennsylvania. And he told me that the way you tell a male from a female plant is the male plant just has a straight stem, and the female stem makes that Y with the bloom in between the axis there on the Y.
Wow.
And I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you. I'll have to look for that. Do you happen to know, do the males, do they have flowers at all? I'm not even sure.
No, they do not have flowers, but you need to have both. But my husband is not a gardener, and he's very proud that he knew something I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, that must be a female. It's Y, and it has that's the flower there. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for that. Next slide. Okay. Well, hard to read this one, but Eastern Red Columbine is another spreader. This one by seed. The Mayapple and some of the earlier ones will spread by runners. The Red Columbine is definitely going to spread by seed. They can take very poor soil or shallow soil, and they do like very good drainage. And actually, I have to say, this one I have not grown. I've tried to, but there is a road out of Blacksburg down here, Mount Tabor, and they cut the rock on one side, down the hill to make the road. And so there's and this is sedimentary rock, so there's shelves, and on these shelves, with just a tiny amount of soil, the columbines are growing there. So if you can get it started, I've heard it can almost be weedy, but they are beautiful in the springtime. Next slide. And I did want to mention a couple for in the summer. You want to plant them in the spring. I got these from a nursery down here in Floyd. A gentleman who is very helpful to the native plant movement, Ian Caton, sold me these. And there's Agastache is probably a well-known perennial, but I was not aware that there was a giant yellow one which can get up to 8 feet. And it's just a magnet. There's no other word for it. The bees just, I look at it and it seems like all the flowers are gone and the bees are still like rummaging around. Where isn't there another flower here? Can I get to it? I only got one. I need to get more. The top picture on the right there is the base of it, and you'll see the rest of it coming up. But I think Agastaches in general are pollinator magnets, but this one is even, a little bit above that too. So, and I think they're quite beautiful. They have these tiny yellow flowers in like these tufts of green up the stem. Next slide. I have this next to it. If we could go to the next slide real quick, and because this shows my house down here on the left-hand side. Hopefully you can see it. Is the yellow Agastache, giant yellow Agastache, and the fluorescence is turned brown. You can see those brown kind of cone things there. A little bit on the right-hand side too. And next to it, I planted this. Pardon me? Somebody said something.
I think it's just something in the background.
So, and next to it is this pale Indian plantain. If we could go back to that slide, go back one. There's a close-up of the flowers, and again, well, in this case, it's wasps. They just seem to really love this plant, and it blooms for months at a time. And again, many people they'll say bees and wasps. I don't want them around. They're going to sting me and everything. And they're going to be something you don't want, but actually you do. As I mentioned earlier, supportive nature is one of my goals. So this is providing nectar to them. And if we could go to the next slide. Again, one of the descriptions mentioned that it has a purple stalk, which is kind of hard to see here. I wouldn't call it purple, but it's I guess sort of a reddish cast to it. But the leaves are quite attractive on the plantain. So these are, and that is, I had never heard of that before. These are somewhat unusual natives, but great for pollinators. So, and you can see on my left, actually in both pictures, the fencing around that I have to do down here. The deer are voracious eaters. So, and my one leftover, I just took these pictures today, one leftover Rudbeckia there was a whole bunch of those. So next slide, please. I think is my references.
So the fence isn't to hold up the plants. It's to keep
right,
the deer away.
Exactly. Yeah, it was not. I didn't put it there to hold the plantain up, but it fell over, and it just, the fence was there, so it kept it up in the air. So I think this is the second year, and I think I did. Yeah, I'm pretty. Last year I staked it. So anyway, if you want more information about native plants and spring perennials, the Virginia Native Plant Society is wonderful. They're always running programs about natives. One of the leaders in the native plant movement is named Doug Tallamy. He has lots of books out, a website. He's got a website where you can plug your location in, and it will tell you what plants to that are good for that location. And then one of the books that I like is this one mentioned here, Wildflowers and Plant Communities of the Southern Appalachian Mountains in Piedmont. And the author is T.P. Spira, I believe is his name. So it emphasizes the fact that, you know, the plants are in communities. They don't occur in isolated patches by themselves. So, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.